Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first info session for our 2025 SDF production grants. My name is Chris Everett, and I am the Artistic Director at the Southern Documentary Fund. The Southern Documentary Fund is a nonprofit that cultivates documentary media made in or about the American South. We believe that media has the power to change lives, and we provide makers with resources to champion Southern storytelling, serving as a leading advocate, providing filmmakers and artists with professional support, filmmaking grants, and fiscal sponsorship. Our next info session for the 2025 production grant will be on August 13th. That's a couple of days from the deadline, so we will have one more info session just in case you have some last minute questions. That will be on August 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also remember that the grant deadline is August 15th at midnight. So definitely get your grant applications in on time because you never know what could happen. So get them in as early as you can. Other events that we have coming up in the month of August include a virtual film screening of the documentary Refuge exclusively on Kinema on August 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with a post-film discussion with the co-directors of the film. Also, if you're in Alabama, join us for the Sidewalk Film Festival on August 24th and check out our panel, Funding Southern Stories, which I'll be moderating that panel with some great filmmakers, Zach Manuel, Darcy McKinnon, and also Brittany Shine as well. So if you're in Alabama, if you're going to Sidewalk, come join us. Also, we have a resource webinar on August 27th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the Documentary Producers Alliance to introduce the Ethics Resource Library, a living, evolving tool designed to help filmmakers navigate the complex ethical questions that arise throughout the creative process. If you love all this SDF programming, the webinars, the screenings, all this stuff, check out our newly launched membership program. With an annual SDF membership, you'll unlock exclusive perks like discounted SDF screenings, behind the scenes access to filmmaker conversations, priority registration for our most popular programs, such as the annual convening, and access to filmmaker-centered resources. Throughout today's talk around the grant, I'll be kind of posting some of these links to upcoming events and all that good stuff, because we definitely want you to stay in touch with us, participate in a lot of this good programming that we have to offer as well. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is the documentary core application in which we use for our SDF production grants. What is the core application? Good thing, good thing. So the nonfiction core application is a collaborative field-wide effort by funders, producers, fiscal sponsors, artist collectives, and artist support organizations to standardize a set of questions that are used in nonfiction funding, fiscal sponsorship, or artist support opportunities. Led by Sundance Institute in partnership with the IDA, the goal of the nonfiction core application proposal checklist initiative to elevate the burden of proposal rewriting on applicants, foster greater access to sources of creative and financial support, and build toward a more equitable and transparent nonfiction field. We've been using the core app for many years. As a documentarian myself, I would always be frustrated, like many of you guys probably are, where every organization, every funding opportunity, you had to just rewrite everything. Everyone had their own set of rules and standards, but the core app has really helped a lot of us out over the years of being able to have a standard set of questions that we can really transfer our answers to the next application out there in the grant opportunity. Now, everyone doesn't use it, but we are one of the organizations that really have been behind this core application as well. And so I'm gonna share my screen. I'm kind of gonna walk through this for you guys. Also, if you have any questions, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A and it has like a little thinking box with a question in it. So if you have any questions, please put them in that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I'll get through those. As I go through the application, I will take breaks for your questions. So if you have any questions about eligibility or other things that you're thinking about, feel free to put those in the box. And also, I will leave my email in the chat box as well. So if you have some questions later on, you might watch this and say, you know what, I don't have any questions right now, but you know how it is. As soon as I end, you say, you know what, I should have asked Chris that. Feel free to email me and we can discuss more about it. So I'm available, always to take your questions today and even after this info session webinar. But let me go ahead and go to the screen here and share it. See here. Cool. So to begin the grant process, what we want to do is go to our website, southerndocumentaryfund.org. southerndocumentaryfund.org. Great website update. LaShawn Noel, our new marketing manager, has really done a great job in doing the redesign on our website. So it's very simple. You go to programs, hit filmmaking grants. This pops up and you just scroll down. You scroll down. It has all the eligibility requirements. And we're going to go over some of this as well. But you click on here. And like I said, applications are due August 15th at midnight. So get those in. You click on this button and then you go to the actual application. See here, make sure the screen is going. All right, got it. Cool. The production grant. Like I said, this is one of the many highlights of the year for us to be able to provide necessary funding for filmmakers and that they are telling these Southern stories. Now, the production grant is strictly for documentaries that are in production, meaning that we do not fund if you're in the development stage or the research stage or post-production stage or, impact in outreach and distribution. This is strictly for projects in production. And if you have questions about that, feel free to put those in the chat as well. Let me see here. And like I said, I'll be taking breaks throughout to answer your questions as well. So what we do is we award 7 projects. We choose 7 projects at $15,000 each for the production. Also, we have to give a huge shout out to the organizations that make this possible. Because like I said, when I first started, man, I think we were maybe giving out $5,000 grants. We've been able to up it, for the past couple of years now. And that's all because of the MacArthur Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and also Wincoat Foundation. So I just want to give them a huge round of applause for their support and really believing in this grant. So we can make these increases to help you with your film projects, because I'm a filmmaker as well. I know that the more money you have to work with, the better you can really accomplish a lot with getting these projects made and out there into the world. So I just want to give a huge thank you to those 3 organizations for their help and support with this. Also, accessibility. Submittable might not be accessible for everyone. So if you do have any required assistance in applying or another alternative method, please reach out to us. Please reach out to us, info at southerndocumentaryfund.org. And all of this is on the application, by the way. So if you need any assistance, feel free to reach out at info at southerndocumentaryfund.org. What we fund. So pretty much these are some of the criteria of what we fund here at SDF for this production grant. This program is for Southern makers. We will fund nonfiction documentaries, shorts, features, docuseries, and experimental documentaries. So we just are not an organization that just funds one thing. We fund a variety. So if you have a short, if you have a feature, if you have a series, or if you're doing something experimental in the documentary landscape, we want to look at all of that. And we try to be balanced as well, because sometimes people think, well, if I'm a first-time filmmaker, do I actually have a shot? Or do you guys really support veteran filmmakers? Yes. We try to be balanced in our selection process. We try to be balanced with states, experience levels, and also genre as well. So like shorts, we try not to have all shorts. We try not to have all features. If we have some good series, we try to throw at least one or two in there. So we try to be balanced with the content, and also state representation, and also experience level as well. So don't be discouraged for whatever state you're in, or what experience level you are, or even if you have a short or a feature. Apply. If you're in production and you have a great proposal, you have a good shot. We seek to bring visibility to Southern makers and communities who are oftentimes overlooked. We will, like I said, we award 7 makers with grants of $15,000 each. Eligibility, some eligibility questions for you. Answers here. Applicants must meet the following criteria to be eligible for our grant. Project directors, the folks who are filling out the application, should reside or have deep roots in one of these following Southern states. So reside meaning that you're living here currently. Deep roots means that you're kind of born and raised, or say if your family has strong ties in one of these Southern states, you will be eligible to apply. So the states that we represent are Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. We do not represent, I know you might have some people out there say, hey, what about Texas? What about Maryland, DC? We do not represent those states. There is some talks, maybe in a year or so, we can expand. But for right now, these are the states that we represent. And the project director, the person that's doing the application, should reside or have deep roots in one of these following states. But if you feel like your situation is special, you're like, hey, Chris, I need to talk to you about it, feel free to email me. I will be putting my email in here, and also the emails on the application as well. And what I was just saying, if your project has a special circumstance that's not described here, reach out to me. My email is right here, chris@southerndocumentaryfund.org. A lot of times it's just, just talking on the phone, and we can talk more about it and, see if you're eligible or not. So, I'm willing to talk to whoever, because I understand how important it is to apply to these grants out here and to get your application in on time as well. Ineligible projects. The following projects are ineligible for funding and will not be considered. These are key. The applicant and project do not meet the above listed eligibility requirements, which are up here, which I just read. 1 second. The projects are non-documentary projects. I've actually had a few people reach out to me. Hey, Chris, do you guys support narrative projects? No, only documentaries that we support. Whether it's a short doc, experimental doc, series, or feature-length documentary, but it has to be a documentary film project. Projects that meet our criteria but have an incomplete application or a missing support material. I saw someone's hand raised up. I will get to you in just a second. After I go through this, I'm going to take a pause and answer some questions, because I know we have some. So when you're doing your application, you want to make sure that you have every section complete. You don't want to have incomplete stuff, because that will disqualify you. So you want to have the materials. So if we ask for a work sample, have the link. Make sure the links are active. I've been in trouble with that before, even me applying to grants. I'll forget something, or make sure the link, I won't sometimes make sure the link is active. Make sure that your links are active and they stay active. I would say from now until about the end of November. Make sure those links stay active, because if you make it to the next round, to the final round, you want to make sure those links are still active. So always make sure your links are working. You have everything uploaded that's required of you, and so you can have a competitive application. So we can, don't have to worry about chasing you down and all that good stuff. You know what I'm saying? Also, projects submitted after the submission deadline, there is a hard deadline, August 15th, midnight. That's the cutoff Eastern Standard Time. So get your applications in by August 15th, 11:59 p.m. Projects that have already received production funds. So say if you already received production funds for the same project, say if you got it last year for a project and you're applying again for the same project, no, you do not qualify. Selection criteria. After this, I'll answer a couple questions that we have. Selection criteria: projects will be chosen based upon the following. Project falls within the scope of SDF mission and values. Primary team members have a strong connection to the story. We definitely look at that. We want to make sure that the film team has a strong connection to the story, access to characters, all those good things. The proposal is real research and clearly presented. And we'll talk more about this as we go through the application. You want each section, you want to make it very thorough and clear. Your application, you don't want to leave anything for guessing. You want to be very descriptive as well. And we'll talk more about that as we go down. Project has a feasible budget and fundraising plan. We do want to make sure that you do have a fundraising plan in place and a decent budget. We'll talk more about that today as well as we go through this. The project director and collaborators possess skills necessary to successfully complete the project. Like I was saying, even if you're a first timer, there are still things you can do to show that, hey, you have the skills and the capability to finish this project. Like one, if you have mentors, if you have advisors, do you have an executive producer that might have a little bit more experience? But we'll talk about that a little bit more, of different things that folks can do at any level to really make certain sections, more competitive. The applicant shows an understanding of their intended audience and how to reach them. We definitely want to know how do you determine your audience? Who's your audience? And also, how are you going to reach them? Because that's why we're doing this. That's why we make films, is for an audience and to show an audience and to engage with them with this content as well. A completed application and all requested documents, I was saying it earlier, and a fulfillment of eligibility requirements. And like I said, we do have another webinar on Wednesday, August 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You go on the website, you can register for that as well. I'm going to take a little break here before we go on to the next part, because I think we had some questions. Hold on one second here. Okay, what is the difference between development and production? So production is you're actively filming. Development, you really haven't filmed anything. You're doing a lot of research. You're doing a lot of, you're developing a crew. You're kind of putting this whole thing together. There are some development funds out there. So also, I'll be putting in the chat box as well. So you do have some funding strictly for development. You know what I'm saying? You might need some money to do some research trips. Like say if you're doing a film in Alabama or Mississippi, and it requires you to go to a museum to maybe see what type of archival material they have. That's a part of development. So you can kind of see what archival materials you have to work with. You have to go there. So that's part of development. You have organizations like Catapult Film Fund that fund development projects, projects that are in development, and they too use the documentary core app as well. So production is that you're filming, because with this application, you're going to have to submit at least 10 minutes of footage from the documentary that you're filming. And we'll talk more about that as well. You had Amanda. She says she accidentally raised the hand. It's cool. It's all good. We got a question here. Another question. Can the video links be password protected, or do they need to be public links? They can be password protected. Your links can be private. They can be password protected as well, but you want to make sure that the password works. So please make sure that the password works. If you're using password protected links, make sure that the password works, and then it remains active till about the end of November. Let me see here. What category would we pick if we're done developing, ready for production, but haven't filmed because we don't have funds yet? See, there's a teaser trailer, but no filming yet. If you do have a trailer, it has to be 10 minutes. It has to be 10 minutes. Let me see here. Does the application need to lay out a distribution strategy, even a loose one? Well, this new core app, and that's what we're going to and that's another reason why I was looking forward to doing this, because we're using the newly updated .core app. So there has been some modifications to it, and distribution is one of those as well. And so they don't really have a distribution question on here, but I would still maybe add a little bit about distribution. If you do have a plan or strategy, I would maybe add that to the audience part of it, because distribution and audience kind of goes hand in hand. But we'll definitely talk a little bit more about that as we get to that section. That was a good question, Eric. See, I'm gonna take like 2 more questions, then we got to go back into the application here. What's the timeline for receiving funds if awarded the grant? So pretty much, we'll be making final decisions, around November. So kind of towards the end of November, top of December is when, folks will kind of get notified, and we will send payment as well. So if you are one on that list, you will get those notifications. We will send notifications for folks who have moved on to the second round, kind of like the second round, and then we will send notification if you made it to the final round as well. And we do, after all of this is said and done towards the end of the year, and if you didn't get the grant, we will send out a sign-up sheet for folks who want feedback on the application. You know what I'm saying? So we will offer that first come, first serve basis. So yeah, let me answer one more question here. Let me see here. Let me go through a little bit more of the application, because we have quite a few piled up questions. Let me go through a little bit more of this, then I'll get back to your questions. Just hold on tight for me. So after you kind of read all of this, you say, you know what, I'm good to go with qualifying to actually apply. You just go to the next step. The next step is a whole bunch of basic stuff. Your project title, the project type. You just make a selection. Your experience. Hold on one second. Let me share my screen. Sorry about that. One second here. Started moving ahead of myself here. Cool. So pretty much, after you read everything, you have your basic contact info. This is actually very important as well, because if you get the grant, we need to know how to get up with you. So definitely take your time with this. Project title, whatever the tentative title is, the type of project. So if you have a short, feature, series, experimental, you just select one. Your experience, definitely mark your experience, and it has a breakdown of, say, if you don't really understand your experience level, it kind of gives you a guide right here in parentheses. And then your contact information. This is very important, so you want to, whoever's applying, their name, last name, phone number, email. Make sure it's an email that you check regularly, because we will have communication with you. Say if you're missing something and you say, hey, this is a great application. Your password isn't working to your work sample, so, just in case, you might miss something and we reach out, we want to be able to contact you, and we want you to be responsive. So whatever number, email address you put down, make sure it's a number and email that you frequently check as well, because you may say, if you get the grant and we send it to the email, and it's an email that you don't check, you might miss out on the money. What I'm saying? So definitely put contact info that you check regularly, because you will get stuff from us. Mailing address as well, because we do want to see what states are applying as well, and all that good stuff. So also, it's good to have a secondary contact. Say if you're out filming and we reaching out for you about something, whether you get the grant or you're missing something from your application, and we don't hear from you in a certain amount of time, we can reach out to your secondary contact. That secondary contact should definitely be somebody involved with the project, whether it's a producer, a co-producer, a co-director, or just someone that, that's reliable, and a second contact information for that person. So you can put their name, their title, their role in the project, their email address and phone number as well. So after you do all that, And, we have a little criteria checkbox. So, you got to be 18 years of age or older, have social security number or US federal tax ID, because we have to have that to be able to pay you if you win the grant. And also, you're a resident or you have deep roots in one of these southern states. And then you go to the next. So I'm gonna stop right here before we start to get into the meat of this thing. Hold on. Let me see here. Hold on 1 second. All right. Question. Projects must be in production. I have done some assorted B-roll filming for my doc, but was planning to wait until the winter for the primary interview filming due to scheduling, subject availability, locations, etc. Meanwhile, I'm still doing more fundraising, resource gathering. But is that okay? The grant funds can certainly be used towards production expenses only and not any development or research, but I'd like to better understand how to ensure my project isn't disqualified because I'm actively working on things that we consider pre-production while currently doing things that are. That's a great question. In documentary, especially indie docs, where sometimes we're doing a lot of things simultaneously. Sometimes you might be in production and post at the same time. As long as you have at least 10 minutes of footage put together that shows the story, the access to the characters, and also the grant impact section of the application, really stating, hey, we're using this money to film some interviews, and such a date, whatever like that. And I'm gonna kind of explain what I've done over the years that I actually got some grants for my martial arts documentary, Grandmaster, and just to show how you really want to be specific of what you're going to use that money for. Let me see here. What's the timelines? We're seeing. Oh, already answered that. Um, okay, we got Tom here. Please expand on the selection evaluation criteria. Do all of the criteria have equal weight, or is there a rubric that the panel used to evaluate proposals? Good question. Good question. So we pretty much have a calculated metric system that our reviewers kind of score behind the scenes. They kind of look at each section, and a lot of the sections are bundled up. So like log line, topic summary, film summary is kind of all together. So really all the sections are really graded equally. So, your log line, all that stuff is very important. Your connection to the story, all those things really are evaluated um, equally across the board. I think, connection to the story, is the story, Southern. We always look for those things as well. And that's because see, the first round is pretty simple. It's when you get to that final round where we have to really, really narrow it down because it's very competitive, the final 40, so to speak. And so, you know, you want to make sure that your budget looks good, your work sample is great, and you want to make sure your work sample matches what you're saying within the proposal, especially in the film summary section and artistic approach as well. And so those are some of the things that we do pay attention to a little bit more as that final round comes through. But pretty much we weigh all these sections equally. Let me see here. Is there a place to put information that exceeds the word limits? For instance, names of advisors. Well, we do have a word limit. You don't want to, just oversaturate your application. The reason why they kind of made certain word limits with this new one, because we don't want you to just be spending all day doing that. So as much as you can, put whatever advisors, and you don't have to put every advisor. I would put advisors who really have some great experience, that really would say, hey, this person really has some key folks behind them for this project. Let me see. I think we answered this one. Cool. Do you have a list of previous awardees? Yes, you can go on our website. We have those listed on our website. I think the past about 5 or 6 years. You can check out previous awardees of the production grant. All right, you may get to this, but do you prefer a sample with full scenes, even if they don't cover each theme within the film, assuming that the themes will be covered within the written grant? We'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about samples and stuff like that. See, Melody, if you are an early career director but have multiple credits from other films, how should they identify on this application when it comes to career experience? You definitely want to put that. We have a section where you're going to talk about that. You definitely want to put that in your bio. So we do have a section for the director's bio. You want to kind of give us a brief bio of some of your experience, even if you're an early career director, but you have some DP experience with some great films, put that. And you can also, if you have a previous director sample of that project, we want to see it as well. Right, see here. I'm gonna go right back in this application and I'll take some more questions in a few. Hold on 1 second. Reshare the screen. All right. Cool. So log line. So after you kind of put all your basic info in and get that going, we're going to start getting to the meat of this thing. So your log line, you definitely want to have this. A log line is pretty simple. It's 2 to 3 sentences. It's a 2 to 3 sentence summary of the project that captures the most important elements. The setting, participants, key issues, and form. What's helped me over the years with log lines, I would go on IMDb and look up documentaries, or I would go to film festival websites. Like I would go to Full Frame, or you got Hot Springs, or Black Star, or Beyond Cary Festival. So there are so many film festivals out here with websites. They usually will put log lines of the films in there. So I would always go on there and just look, see how people are wording, what words they're using. And so if you need some examples, there are plenty of examples, or just look up your favorite documentaries or favorite films, and they usually will have a log line attached to it. So you want to start off with that. You want to have a strong log line that really captivates. Anytime I review an application, this is where I start first. This has to draw me in. You know what I'm saying? The log line always draws folks in, not only the reviewer, but also your audience as well. You know what I'm saying? So, these things that you're doing with this application is definitely transferable when you are finished with your film. So like marketing, log line is all about that. Your synopsis as well. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of these things are very interchangeable throughout the film process. Topic summary. And like I said, some of this stuff has changed, like the wording. Last year and the year prior, this was called something else. It was like topic, like background topic or something like that. They just kind of changed the title of it, but it still means the same. So the topic summary is really explaining the topic, the theme, context, stakes, relevance, or questions that you're exploring in your project. So like with my film that I got a few grants for a few years ago, Grand Master is a martial arts film. And so the topic summary I kind of stuck with was martial arts in the United States. So I gave it background of African Americans in martial arts, where we were inspired to do that. I talk about the Kung Fu movie craze with Bruce Lee, the Black Power movement, the Black exploitation era of films that used martial arts sequences throughout, even though they weren't the best stuff. That really captured a lot of African Americans to get into martial arts in some capacity. And so you want to give the topic and subject some background, and that's what really this topic summary is all about. Film summary, this is really kind of like your synopsis. So with the film summary, you want to give an overview, introduction about the main participants, characters, and some of the plot points in the film as well. If your project is a non-narrative or not a character-driven story, what is the concept and how will it be constructed? You know what I'm saying? So if you don't have like a certain subject that you're following around through the documentary, say if your joint is a strict historical type of piece, how will it be structured? What is the concept? Also, please be clear about the elements of your story as well that might be unknown. or unclear and highlights questions that might steer in this direction. I know in the Grandmaster film, one of the Grandmaster Moore students, Wayne, he was this big champion. And one of the things we were unclear about, will he become a two-time world champion? And so we didn't even get to, that part yet. We were unclear. We had to wait pretty much another year to see what would happen. So those are some of the things we kind of put in there. Say, hey, he's training hard with Grandmaster Moore to see if he can repeat to be a world champion. We haven't gotten there yet. And hopefully the outcome is that he wins. If not, it's a life lesson, that can be learned as well. So that's how pretty much that is. Artistic approach. This is one of my favorite when I'm doing these applications, because you can really, really sell the film with the artistic approach as well. And like I said, with artistic approach, you want to make sure it kind of matches your work sample. And when we get to the work sample, I'll kind of reference this as well. But your artistic approach is you're describing the artistic vision for this film. And remember, the artistic vision can change. Things change. You might not get all the money, that you want to do. Like we wanted to do reenactments for Grandmaster. We could never raise enough money for it. So we had to scratch that idea. But when doing grants, we put it in. You know what I'm saying? So with grants, we want to see your full vision. Even if you don't raise all the money to do it, we want to see that you have a plan, that you thoroughly thought about it as well. So really in the artistic approach, you want to paint a picture and be very descriptive of what your film will be and how it will look, how it will flow visually. What about audio? Will you be using sound as a key component? I know in my documentary, sound and the score is very important. So usually when I'm doing these grants, I'm always talking about the soundtrack and the score that we would have to accompany to bring these characters and the story to life. Also motion graphics and animation. Are you going to have some of that involved? And so all those elements that will bring your film to life, you want to put that in here and be very descriptive. We're going to stop in a little bit. We're going to go through a few more sections, then I'll stop to answer some questions, and then we'll keep moving forward. Filmmaker statement. This right here can be by the director and or the producer as well. So pretty much a statement on who you are as a filmmaker. A lot of times we want to know that, what inspires you? How is this project expanding or evolving your creative practice as well? What does success look like for you as an artist, especially being in the South or having ties to the South? What is success to you? And what are the creative, professional, and holistic barriers and challenges that you might be facing as well? Connection and point of view. This used to be called, I think, connection and access. So I think they actually combined a couple of questions into one. But connection is very important to us. We definitely want to make sure the filmmakers, the film team has some connection to the story and really have that trust built with the subject and also the community that this story is based upon as well. And see, some of this right here, these next questions really are going to dive into that. But on all of these questions, we do have context of what we're looking for. So right below all of these questions, it kind of goes in depth. I'm gonna do like two more of these, and I'm gonna go to the questions from you guys. Connection and point of view. What is your connection to the story? Like I was just saying, what is your connection to the participants, the theme, community, location, archives? Like say if I was doing a story, I would say, hey, I'm doing a story on diabetes, a documentary. And it's something I've actually thought about anyway, because I'm a type 2 diabetic. Even though the story might not be on me personally, say if I'm following two folks that are dealing with diabetes, my connection to the story is that I am a diabetic. And also my grandfather was one as well. And so there's a connection there. Even though I might not be related to these participants, I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, they might be in Florida. The connection is that I too am a diabetic. Also, my grandfather was one as well. So that's that connection. Or say like I'm doing a story about a certain community, I can say, well, I grew up in this town, I grew up in Laurinburg, or my grandparents were from there, or my aunt and uncles were from there. We used to visit all the time. Those are the connections that, we're looking for. And archives as well. I know some people, they had an archive collection of some stuff and say, you know what, I want to do a documentary on this. I want to preserve this history. They have an archival collection that they want to base this documentary on. That's their connection. They have access to these materials. So we definitely want to know what's your connection to this. It doesn't always have to be, I'm African American and this is African American story. It can be other things as well. How do your interests, motivations, and or worldview shape your approach to the story? You know what I'm saying? So we want to know that too, your motivation behind doing this as well. And how does, your view on certain subjects and topics, how does it shape your approach to this story and capturing this story? What perspective, insights, or bias do you bring to the story as well? You know what I'm saying? So, say if you know, you used to live in the South, now you live out west or up north, you might say, hey, I haven't lived in the South in a while, so I might have a little bias. I might think that the South is all racist. You know what I'm saying? You never know what type of biases we might have, just off of our environment or location, geographical location at that, and vice versa. I'm gonna do this last one here, and then I'm gonna go to some questions. Accountability and community care. This is another one that I think they actually made a vocal point on. And also, what I do love about this year's core app, they've provided a lot of good examples. And I'm gonna pop this open as well after we read through it. But a lot of these things, they give links to say you're like, what, I'm not too sure about that, let me click this link. So they provided a lot of good resource materials and some good stuff, and I've been checking them out as well. It's actually helped me in my grant writing process. So shout out to Sundance and IDA of helping this grant process a lot for us filmmakers. So accountability and community care. We're going to definitely look at this as well. Describe your ethical considerations and practices of accountability in your filmmaking process. The documentary accountability working group, DOG, they provide some great guidance right here. They have a PDF and the website is right here. So if you need some help of how to word certain things, or sometimes we're not even thinking about it. It took me a while to really start thinking about accountability, community care, and safety, and all that stuff, accessibility in my filmmaking. But we have to start thinking about that. And so I'm glad that we've started implementing a little bit more of that, even in our own practices with these grants. This can include a description of your guiding values, processes of establishing and maintaining ongoing consent, providing transparency about your filmmaking process, collecting feedback, etc. For example, how do you reflect on and address the potential consequences of your storytelling choices on participants, audiences, your crew, and other stakeholders? What activities or strategies do you use to implement your values as they relate to care for yourself and others? For example, I know even with Grandmaster, I didn't think about at first, but going to workshops and hearing about accountability in filmmaking, it really made me start thinking about, let me keep him involved. Let me, he doesn't have to, be involved in everything, but I would at least try to set up maybe like a every other week meeting on a Monday or Tuesday to say, hey, Grandmaster Moore, this is where we're at. We're going to try to film some more, or say, man, we're not filming nothing because we have no money. We're trying to fundraise at the moment, And then also I would get him involved in some of the, collecting feedback in the work in progress events we had to really get him engaged with the audience so they can hear from him. He can start getting familiar with these type of crowds and these experiences, because everyone's never done Q&As for film screenings. Not everyone knows, how these things go. And so I wanted to make sure that he was involved in some of this. Even though I'm still the primary filmmaker and artist, you still want to, keep your subjects involved and just to keep them updated, because a lot of times, they don't understand what all goes into making films. I think people hear the word film and they automatically think, hey, I'm about to make a whole bunch of money, or we're going to go on tour all over the country and our film's going to be in all these theaters. It don't work like that. We know as filmmakers, it doesn't work like that. But the average person who's in your film, they don't know. And so you really want to make sure that you're transparent with those things. And like I said, if you need further guidance, right here, you just click on it and it'll come up. Because like I said, we have several of these links throughout the application. Um, so if you definitely need some help, there's plenty of resources out here um, right on the application. All right, I'm gonna stop real quick and take some more questions and we'll get right back into this thing. Let me answer these questions here. Let's see. If I have production experience but not directing, should I list myself as a beginner if I'm filling out the application? Yes, yes. But in your bio, definitely put your production experience in there. Someone said, can an organization apply? An organization can apply, long as the organization has a project director. So it still works the same way. Just like if I have a production company, I'm applying for the grant, but we have the crew lineup, we have the director, producer, all those good things. But if you are an organization that is producing a documentary film, you can apply. Proof of concept has to be at least 10 minutes. What's the maximum time for the proof of concept? You want to have at least 10 minutes, so 10 to 15 minutes. But our grant reviewers are only required to review 10 minutes. Someone like myself, I like to watch everything. I like to watch the whole thing. But our reviewers are only required to watch up to 10 minutes. But the maximum is 15. See, we got a couple more questions before we move to the next sections. See, I'm curious about a project that is really relying on sound and the sound driving the project. Okay. Meaning a project that is in production and relying on the funds to record the sound and master the sound. That won't be in the work sample. Will they hurt the work sample? Not necessarily. You can still produce a 10-minute sample utilizing a lot of sound. It depends on what type of sound. Will it be narration? Will it be, environmental sound type of thing? So it really depends on what all have you recorded so far. Now it has to be a film related project. So you have to have some film elements, but I love those type of sound focused docs. A good one I would suggest was I called him Morgan with my man Larry Thomas, a late friend of mine, and they used like a lot of audio elements throughout that. They used a recording that he recorded an interview and kind of used that interview he did 40 years ago to use it as narration throughout. So I think, utilizing narration and stuff like that mixed in with archival and some video elements, you can definitely create a polished and well put together 10-minute sample. Let me see. Within the 10 minutes of footage, how polished of an edit are you looking for since we are not in post? Well, it doesn't have to be polished like that. And we're going to talk about that in the next set of things. When we get to the video sample part of it, it doesn't have to be polished. We want to see, we know it's not going to have color correction. We know it's not going to have sound mixing. We know you're not going to have the bells and whistles. But we do want to see that you have access to the characters. And there's a story there. Story being there has nothing to do with coloring. It has nothing to do with sound mix. You know what I'm saying? So we want to make sure that you have a story there or a nice completed scene. So we see that you have access to these characters. There's a story there. It's intriguing. So that's really what it's all about. We know it's not going to be polished. It's not about that. It's really about, is there a story there? Do you have access to these characters as well? See, I'm gonna get a couple more questions and then we'll move on. See here. For shorts, is there a runtime of at least 10 minutes since that is a requirement? Yes. Do people see budget for the film subject? Well, we're going to talk more about budget. I'm also going to show you an example template that you can use, but it really depends what your project requires. So, I know some folks have said, you know what, you have to pay subjects. If you want to do that, you can do that. Sometimes you can put in there stipends. For example, when your film is done, and you want to do impact screenings and you want to bring a subject or two, you can actually, put that in your impact part, saying that, we want to, pay subjects for certain impact screenings, a stipend of like 250 each event. You know what I'm saying? So if it depends on the film, it really depends on the film for that. If your film, if you want to do that and your film really calls for that, you can definitely put that in there. There's really not a right or wrong for budgeting the film subjects. It really depends on what you have the capacity to do, the funding that you can get for it as well. So it really depends. Let me see here. Let me reshare my screen, and let's try to get through this. Safety and security. It kind of goes back, to these kind of top questions right here. Safety and security. If relevant, please reflect on any safety and security concerns throughout the life cycle of your project, only if relevant. You know what I'm saying? So if you feel like, hey, my project, really doesn't deal with this, you can just state that. You know what I'm saying? But if it does, do you have any safety and security concerns throughout? It depends on your subject matter. You might be doing a subject on police brutality or something like that, or I've actually thought about dabbling into true crime with my next project. And so these are some of the things I'm thinking about. You know what I'm saying? And so it really depends on the subject, and if your project really deals with that somewhat. How will you mitigate the risk? You know what I'm saying? Also, this is a good template as well, a good guide. So if you're kind of unsure with this question, go to the Safe and Secure Handbook and you just click the link. This is a great handbook. I'm actually looking at this now, based off of what I got, what I just told you guys about possibly a true crime documentary series. And this is a great handbook to kind of start thinking about this stuff and see if it really relates to your film. Because, like I said, they've done a great job of adding some extra resources to these questions as well. And we have all of this stuff on here linked up. Accessibility. This is another one we definitely look at, because you want to think about this not only during the production, but also when the film is out there in the world. And so, if applicable, how do you intend to make your film and or your production accessible to folks who are, deaf, blind, low vision, disabled, all of that? What about the subjects? I had to think about that with Grandmaster Moore. He's in a wheelchair. So, I had to make sure, because I wasn't even thinking about it. I had to make sure if we're going to film him somewhere, and we ran into an issue like that, and it was totally my fault because I wasn't thinking about it. We had took him to a martial arts school to film him, and the martial arts school wasn't wheelchair accessible, and so we had a tough time getting them in there and out. And so I said, you know what? I need to make sure if we ever take him somewhere to film, I need to make sure the location is wheelchair accessible for one, because we want to make sure he's comfortable as well. And then also, when we do screenings, do work in progress screenings, I made sure that the venues where we did screenings were wheelchair accessible for him as well. And then also, we have to think about, what about folks who have low vision, really can't hear that well. We always try to make sure we have captions as well. So I've been doing that the past couple of years. I was a person like, man, I hate captions. I hate watching them. They just distract me from the film, but we have to be accessible. Everyone, can't hear as well as us. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to experience the film and to engage with it. And that's what this question is about. Talk about that. And these are sometimes things you're not even thinking about, but if you just break it down, you might have some accessibility things with your film. And think about that. Think about after the film is done, the type of venues, other ways that you can have. I know in some instances, I've seen some events, they actually have a person doing sign language, as well. Those things cost, of course, but you can put that in your budget as well to show that, hey, another reason, why we're trying to raise money and got this complete robust budget is because we want to have some money to have some of these accessibility resources. So think about those things as well when you're doing these applications. And then also, if you need some guidance or some tools and resource tips, you got these two links. You got the Forward Doc Toolkit and the Forward Doc Engagement Pack that really can kind of show you, what this is all about. Audience consideration. Audience is very key. We definitely look at this as well. Describe the audiences you would like your film to reach and why. How do you plan to reach them as well? If you have some distribution ideas, you can definitely put this in here. Distribution really wasn't a main question for the core app this year, but audience is definitely key. Who is your audience? You don't want to be vague with this. And I think a lot of times audience sounds easy, but it's not because you can just be vague with an audience description, but that's not going to help your case. We want to make sure who is the target audience, for your subject matter. And that's not up to me to decide. It really depends on what your film is about. Just really think about your film. What are the themes and all of that? And who is the specific audience that you want this film to reach? Now, we all want everybody to watch our film, of course, but that's being vague. Who is the specific audience that you want this film to reach, and how will you reach them? Different audiences have different ways of reaching. If you're targeting a younger demographic, social media is a key way, or influencers, stuff like that is a key way. Other folks are other ways, newspaper advertisements, stuff like that. Or your audience might read a certain magazine, you know what I'm saying? So you really want to talk about who's your audience and how are you going to reach them and why are you reaching them as well. Intended impact. This right here, talk about the impact that you want to have with your film. Also, there is a great reference guide, the Impact Field Guide right here, and you click on it. And this is one of my go-tos as well, because I do some impact consulting and stuff like that. This is a great resource of how to do impact and why. But you just click that link, it has everything on here. So you want to describe your vision for influence of this film, whether it's to change some type of legislation or it's to, I know one documentary that we support through fiscal sponsorship, Humble in the Jungle. On the surface, it's a hip hop documentary because it's about Mike G of the Jungle Brothers. Ricky and Sheree, they might even be on today, but I want to use you guys as an example. So it's about Mike G of the legendary hip hop group, the Jungle Brothers. And so on the surface, it seems like this is just a hip hop documentary, but under the surface, as you see what the film is about, it's about Mike G, who is a licensed plumber. After the glitz and the glam fades, and you still need to provide for your family, trades are a great way to do that. And so their impact is to really show, you might want to be a rapper or an actor or an entertainer, but what is your fallback plan? You can be an actual, there are so many good trade programs out here, whether you want to be a barber, a plumber, electrician. And so they want to really make impact with a lot of young folks who are maybe interested in the trades or haven't thought about the trades in that way. So that's their kind of like intended impact, is really to help increase trade programs and the need for trade programs in urban communities. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of like an example of like intended impact. So it really depends on your film and what you want the impact to be. My film, Wilmington on Fire, our impact was to finally, have the conversation on reparations for African Americans. And we've been doing those type of screenings and engagements for over 10 years. And we actually did some type of accomplishment because we were mentioned in Congress back in the summer of 2019 for the first ever hearing on reparations. And we were the only film that was mentioned during that whole hearing as well. And so that was our impact. It took a while to get there, but that was the impact that we wanted to create. This is an easy one, but still, you want to kind of pay attention. Key creative personnel. This is pretty much the breakdown of your crew. You definitely want to have your crew. I think your crew is very important. We've all been beginner filmmakers before. We all have. Wilmington on Fire was my very first film. I had no experience at all, but I didn't have the experience, but I made sure I surrounded myself with experience. For example, even though I was a first-time filmmaker, I had an executive producer, Pete Chapman. I reached out, and sometimes it's all about timing. You'll be surprised what you can negotiate with certain people. Pete Chapman, he's a very famous Hollywood TV director now. He's married to the lovely Kelly McCreary of what's that show? It's a hospital show that Shonda Rhimes does. I forgot, but she was a star on there for many years. And so I had him as an executive producer. I reached out to him, said, Pete, man, I'm a fan of your work. He's, did some indie films back in the day. I said, man, I would love for you to be an EP on this. You don't have to do much. Just kind of give me some guidance. If I send you some footage, can you just check out some stuff, give me some tips, some pointers? He said, man, I'd love to be involved in this project. And so we had him as an EP. That just kind of, showed that, hey, we had, even though I'm a first timer, I do have some veteran experience who's in the industry and that can help as well to make sure that, they know to steer me from the roadblocks and to guide me in certain things. And sometimes, it's not all about money. You could have an executive producer, hey, Chris, I like this project. I'm gonna give you 50 grand. I've had producers like that before as well, that they don't want to be involved in all the looking at footage and all of that. They ain't trying to think. They just like the concept. They want to get behind something and say, hey, here's the money and go. If they have a name in the industry, definitely have them, down here. But you want to put your key crew members, yourself as a director. You kind of, what I'm saying, you want to put, some short paragraphs in there. Your DP, camera. Sometimes, as indie filmmakers, we're doing both. We're the director and we're the DP, and sometimes the editor as well. If that's the case, you put that in parentheses. Do you have a producer? Do you have an editor? If sound is going to play a big part, who's going to be your composer? You want to talk about all of that. And also, if you have any advisors, producers or executive producers or producer who has a name in the industry possibly or has some good experience, definitely list them. I'm going to do two more, then I'm going to stop before we get to the financial aspects of this. So I'm going to stop after these two questions, answer some questions, then we'll go right back into it. Creative control, definitely, this is key as well. In one or two sentences, please describe who has creative control and legal ownership of this project. Meaning who has the creative control. I think someone earlier asked the question, can an organization apply? Yes, you definitely can apply. If the director is applying, 9 times out of 10, he's pretty much probably they're pretty much work for hire. And so that organization probably will have creative control. But 9 times out of 10, if you're just an independent filmmaker making a project, a lot of times we have creative control, but you want to make sure you have that stuff in right. You want to make sure that, hey, whoever has creative control, you have to state that in here. Project stage and timeline. This is definitely a key one. You definitely want to have this regardless of whether you're doing a grant or not. You want to have a timeline to stick to, because that kind of, helps you stay focused. Also helps you figure out, okay, what grants do I need to hit? What timeline is coming up, deadlines. So pretty much you want to put it in a list form, just an outline, a simple outline of the production timeline from development all the way up until you're ready to do screenings. So say if you started development January of this year, January 2025, so you will put January 2025 till about, say, March 2025. These are just examples. So it's really depend on when you actually did this. And then you got production, you got production now until the end of the year. So you'll put that. those dates and kind of be descriptive. Hey, during this time, we're going to be filming interviews. We're going to be, documenting our three main subjects, at work, doing martial arts or whatever. And then you'll have another section where you have post-production. We're going to spend this much time editing, gathering last minute archival materials, working with the sound and the score and all that. And then you have another section of that we should have this completed by this date, in which we'll be starting to submit the festivals and doing screenings. So you kind of want to list that right here with your project stage and timeline. And don't worry if it's not perfect. I've changed my project stage and timeline so many times over the past 5 years doing my documentaries, because things happen. You don't get the funding, or certain things happen. I know when COVID hit, that completely wiped out my whole timeline. And then trying to get it back going again after COVID really changed up some things. So things happen. We don't really care about that. We just want to see that you have a plan. And we understand that the plans will change, but at least have a plan and a game plan, and just showing us that, hey, you have thought about this, this is what it is. But we all know that it's subject to change, but don't worry about that. Let me stop here before I go on to this last section. And we're almost there. Just bear with me. I know this is a long process. I get it, but we're almost there. I'm answer a couple more questions. Let me see here. Oh yeah, Grey's Anatomy. Yep, Kelly McCreary. That's Pete's wife. On a film I did, I had a meeting with a disability expert and asked her about what we needed to do to help with making films accessible. These community members are amazing. Yeah, if you definitely have access to an expert, definitely tap into that. And like I said, we have some resources as well on the application if you need to start thinking about that. For an experimental doc, the crew is 2 people. Will this look bad on the grant? No, not at all. Not at all. It really depends on who the 2 people are. Like I said, when you're doing these indie docs, a lot of times, you're the director, producer, editor, and cinematographer. And you might have a person for sound. And that could be it, but I would definitely maybe list, say if you have someone to do the key art, we work with a Hollywood key art designer. And sometimes we'll put that in our applications so we can show, hey, we will have a top-notch key art campaign that you would not have to worry about. Everyone might just make some homemade key art stuff. We work with an actual Hollywood key artist that works with us directly. So our key art stuff is always going to be on point. Our materials, all of that will be on point. So sometimes I will add those folks. So if you can, maybe add an advisor, or if you have an executive producer, but just having 2 people, it really depends on what those positions are, but you should be fine. All right, we're going to go right back into this. Let me share my screen. We're almost there. And like I said, if you have questions, continue to put them in the chat box. Let's see here. Funding. Now, this is definitely key. It's very key, but also sometimes it's the hardest. Sometimes thinking about funding when you're trying to get funded. So hold on one second here. So funding strategy. We definitely want to make sure that you have a strategy because our $15,000 grant is not going to fund your whole film 9 times out of 10. Now, we do want you to apply to our grant, but what other grants out there are you applying to? And it's not just grants. So we want to describe the overall fundraising strategy and who's leading those efforts as well. So if it's you say, hey, the director or producer is leading our fundraising efforts. We are looking into applying to these grants and list them. Like I said, you might not even get them. Who cares? We want to see that you have a plan because, life isn't perfect. When I do my grants, I list a whole bunch of grants and also think outside the box. I know we have, the ones that we try to go for, like ours. I'm glad everyone is applying, continue to apply, but, you have ours, you might have ITBS, the usual suspects. But a lot of times we're not even thinking about our local funding places out there, like our local arts councils, our state arts councils. Um, that's what we want to see, that you're thinking outside the box as well in your strategy, because that's what it takes nowadays. You have to look at funding sources from all different angles. So thinking about your local arts council, your state arts councils, other foundations that might want to give you some money for the subject matter. They might not be, a film funded institution, but they might, want to give you money for the subject, because, say if you're doing something on river conservation, it might be an organization, they don't fund films, but they like that your film is about that, so they'll give you some money. You know what I'm saying? So you can put those type of things in there. Plus, your standard SDF grant, ITVS, IDA. But think about some of these other funding institutions that a lot of times we don't think about, and also crowdfunding as well. Talk about the possibility of doing a crowdfunding campaign. I suggest Seed and Spark. Not only because they support us, but I've had great success over the years using Seed and Spark. So look at Seed and Spark. You got Kickstarter, you got Indiegogo, but think about possibly doing a crowdfunding campaign. And you want to put the amount. Say, hey, we're thinking about launching a crowdfunding campaign in the fall, a 30-day campaign. We're trying to raise 25,000 to go towards production as well. This, and that. Also, if you have a fiscal sponsor, I know some of you guys are fiscally sponsored by us. You can talk about how you're going to utilize fiscal sponsorship as well to get some donations or to apply to certain grants as well that require fiscal sponsorship. So that's the strategy, a well thought out strategy of all the different ways that you can raise money to get this film done, because we want you to get it done. We know that just our 15,000 won't get it all the way done. We want to make sure that, okay, if you got our 15,000, how are you going to combine some other funds, some other resources to get it made? Grant impact. This is another key one that I think a lot of people overlook, because it sounds easy, but with grant impact, you want to be very specific. You want to be very specific. I know there are a few folks out there, and sometimes, you're kind of doing both. You're kind of filming and you're kind of editing at the same time. With grant impact, you want to make sure that if you receive this grant, if you receive this 15,000 from us, how will these funds be spent, and how would the funds help you move forward with your project? So with this, you want to be very, very specific. How would you use this grant if you got it? So this is production. So this has to be for production. You don't want to put, hey, I'm going to use this for editing. You know what I'm saying? Unless you want to say, hey, we want to film a certain amount of interviews, then hopefully we can edit a better sizzle reel to help us get more funding for production. Or what I did with Grandmaster one year, this is before I even worked at SDF. I actually got like a $5,000 grant from SDF years ago. My grant impact was, and I think I told you guys about this earlier, how Wayne, one of Grandmaster Moore's students, had that big tournament coming up in Miami, Florida, where he wanted to go back to defend his title and see if he can become a 2-time world karate champion. So that's what we needed the grant for. We were in production. We had like 10 minutes of footage already put together. And I said, you know what, we really need to get down to Miami to film this. This is a very important piece of our film. This comes around once a year, and he's going back to defend his title. He's going already. We've already talked to the organizers of the tournament. They gave us full access, free passes and everything. We just need some money to get down there. And so that's how we described it. We described the importance of it, why this tournament comes around once a year. And this is his second time going to defend his title. He's a returning champion. He's been working with Grandmaster Moore for about a good 6 months to really lead up to this. And this is a very important part of the story that we have to capture. And so, that's why I was saying you have to really show the urgency as well, to really show, hey, this grant is important, and we really need this to be able to capture whatever it is you're trying to capture in production. Let me see. I'm going to do this right here. Then I'm going to stop for a second. Then we're almost done, actually. Funding detail. This is another one that you definitely want to take your time with. So funding. And here's an example of it as well, right here. So you want to list all sources of funding and the amounts. For example, like I was telling you earlier, kind of goes back to your fundraising strategy in a sense, but this is kind of like you're going to spell out kind of like an itemized list. And this is an example. So you have your funding source, the amount, and status. So you kind of want to lay it out like this. I would just lay it out like this: funding source, amount, and status. So funding source, you can just go ahead and list us first if you want. So for example, you got under funding source, you can put Southern Documentary Fund, production grant, and the amount 15,000. Status, you can just put, applied. You know what I'm saying? So this right here is showing that you've actually looked and say, you know what, these are the funding sources that I've applied to or I secured. Say if you got a grant already, you put that here. Say if it's from a foundation and they gave you 20,000, you put that there, and then you put the status, you secured it, so you have that. Say if you have a private donor, that say, I've had that over the years where I've had private donors give me 30, 40 grand. I will list that here and the amount and secured. Or if I had some private donors that I put out some fillers for, I said, hey, I've applied or I reached out. So this is kind of, you want to kind of break it down and put it right here of all the funding sources that you either have applied to, you're going to apply to, or if you secured, or say if you didn't get it, you can kind of put that on there as well. We just want to see that you have a plan. Budget. I'll just go ahead and just go through these and then we'll just take the last, then I'll just do all questions. So I just want to go ahead and get through the application, and we only got a couple more questions. Budget is very key. Budget is very key. Again, it's one of those things that are key and it's hard. I still struggle with budgets, but we do have a great template to help you out, and it's connected here. And I'll talk about that, but we want to have a comprehensive line item budget. Provide the budget from development through release. We want to see it, the whole thing, development through release, and the budget total as well. Let me show you what this budget template would look. All you do is just click here. Hold on. Just click on the blue, where it says a fresh 2025 introduction to documentary budgeting and scheduling with new templates. You click on that joint. Hold on. And this pops up. Let me close this out here. And so this is a great tool. I've been using this for my budgets, and it's a good template. So it kind of gives you a whole guide overview of it. And so you click here, it says fully revised budget template. It opens up, it downloads for you, and it'll just pop up, and then you can just revise it however you want. And then we also have on our website here, let me go to our website. We ain't gonna leave you hanging, we do have, hold on, let me move this out of the way. It's in my way here. Okay, hold up. See here. When you go to our grant page, we do have some good video tutorials as well. Not really tutorials, but they're pretty much like from old info sessions, webinars about grants. So you go to the resources and we have the link to that IDA sample budget. We do have a checklist as well. We have it in Spanish also. We do have, where's it at? Yeah, we have a roundtable budgeting workshop, one, and then we also have another one. So we have two. I think one is from Darcy McKinnon that she did with us years ago, and then also Rebecca Ferguson as well, who did a webinar for us. So I still look at these to this day. Great information, great insight. And so definitely go to our page and utilize this, utilize these resources. Because like I said, we try to provide you with much as we can, because I understand this stuff is tough, man, especially with budgeting. And then I know a lot of times people, and we might have a question about it, should I include paying myself? Yes, you should include, you're supposed to do that. We want you to pay yourself when you're doing these films. And so definitely include that in the budget. If you're the director, you need to put your fee in there. If you're the producer, you need to put your fee in there. Editor, all that. You want to pay yourself. We want to see that you're paying yourself as well. I used to do that. I used to say, you know what? If the grant is 15,000, let me see if I can make my budget to be 25 or 30 or even 15 sometimes. And that's going to make me look like I can make this film for 15. No, that's going to get you disqualified. I had to learn it the hard way. One of my mentors, and also being a part of Firelight, really showed me a lot of how this game works and what funders are looking for. And one lady, she was working at Sundance. She worked at their grant department. And I told her, I said, I thought that, making my budget as small as possible would increase my chances of getting a grant. Because, hey, if I can do this for this amount, I know I can, get this grant. And they say, no, Chris, that's you don't want to do that, because it's going to show that you don't really have a real plan. There's no way you can make the whole film for that. Now, we all put a big budget down for a project. Say if our budget is 800,000, like for Grandmaster, my budget was like 900,000. There's no way I raised that money. I don't even think I raised 100,000. But when applying to grants, I used that $900,000 budget. One, because to show that, hey, we have a concrete plan. If we do raise the money, this is what it is. We know that the 20,000 you're giving us is not going to fund the whole project. It may, fund a couple of key days of filming that we need to move the story forward so we can get more funding. You're always working on about 3 or 4 budgets when you're doing a documentary. You have your top budget and you have your low budget for, like, when you get a lot of favors and deferment, services and stuff like that. So you definitely always want to use the best budget possible. And like I said, always include paying yourself as well. We're almost done. Then I'll get to everyone's questions and we can wrap up. Visual samples. It's a little different this year. Like I said, we're adapting to the new core app. So you definitely want to have some visual samples with this. Director's prior work, that's not required, but if you want to put some of your prior work, like I always use Wilmington on Fire. That was my first film. Won a lot of awards. Really, that's the film I'm known by. So I'll always put that in there. So if you're known by a certain film, or if you had great success, or just you had a great film, or if you was involved with a film, say if you were the DP of a film, this is kind of like your first, directorial film, and you had some work that you're very proud of as a DP, or you were the editor, put that down here and just state that. Say, hey, I was the editor on this project. I was the DP on this project. And you can put that in director's prior work. Also, we want you to start using captions. That's one thing we definitely want this year, and because we're getting into accessibility. Captions, I don't really need them, but some of our reviewers might, because like I said, everyone is different and we want to be accessible. I'm actually using captions. I use captions now when I send clips or do trailers or work in progress or whatever. I'm always using captions. So definitely get your captions. We have some great resources here too, of how to do captions. I think you can actually do captions on Premiere now and some other things, but we do have some resource guides on here of how to do captions or where to get those type of services done. So prior work. Also, another key thing is the current sample. That's something we're definitely going to look at. Is your current sample for sure? Like I said, I would say 10 to 20 minutes. They're only required to watch 10 minutes. Someone like me, I like to watch everything. I like to watch the whole thing and see what you got. But they're only required to watch 10 minutes. Make sure you have your captions. And like I said, the sample should demonstrate your access to the characters, the visual treatment. It kind of goes back to that artistic approach in the application earlier. You might not have all of it. You might not have the motion graphics and stuff like that, but kind of give us a taste of what you're talking about in that artistic approach. And also the tone and style as well. And like I said, we know it's not going to have no coloring. We know the sound isn't going to be all there. We know you're going to be using temp music, but you can still craft a solid sample to give us, to show that you have access to these characters. There is a story there, and you also have some type of tone and style that we can definitely check out. Let's see here. Cool. Yeah. And like I said, with these samples, make sure that we have access. At least give us to the end, just have it available to the end of November. If you have passwords, that's great. If you want to make them unlisted, that's great. We will not share these outside of our reviewers. Our reviewers have to look at them, but they won't share them. We won't share that information. So make sure your passwords are working. Make sure they're working, because that's how, we've ran into a couple of great applications. The whole application is flawless, budget, the description, everything, and then we go to the sample and it's not working. So we'll chase you down, but it's only so much we can do. So you want to make sure that your links are working properly and the passwords are working properly. Also, this is like a required question. It's very easy. So pretty much after you do this current sample part, it's really just downhill from here. It's all easy. Have you received support from SDF in the past? This is really more demographic information. If you did receive support, what was your involvement, whether it's fiscal sponsorship or whatever? How did you learn about our grant program? We want to know this, like did your local arts council tell you? Did you see it in social media? This helps us figure out where we need to put our resources in marketing and promoting this, because we want to make sure that it's reaching you guys. Also, what organizations or organization in your community do you recognize as serving independent artists and documentary makers? We want to know that too, because we want to be able to partner with certain folks. We represent the whole South. And so if it's an organization in Arkansas or Tennessee or Georgia or Florida that we might not know about, Virginia, and we want to know, like, they're doing some great stuff in your community, we would love to continue to let them know about these funding opportunities, our webinars, our screenings, we would love to maybe partner with them on something, maybe a webinar possibly. So we want to know what organizations are really supporting documentary artists in your community, and hopefully we can maybe partner with them down the road. And the rest of this stuff is optional, totally demographic survey stuff, identity, race, ethnicity, gender. Do you identify as a person with disability? All this stuff is optional down here. Feel free to answer it if you want, but it's all optional. And then if you got everything going, just click that submit button and good luck. But thank you guys again. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of go through a few more questions that you might have before we wrap it up. Let me see here. Let me answer a couple of these questions. All right. When listing funding sources, can anonymous funding sources remain anonymous? Was it best if they are disclosed? Can it be disclosed as private donor? Yes, I would put private donor. If they want to remain anonymous, I would put private donor, the amount. And if you secured it, put secured. So it really depends on also if it's secured or not. But yeah, I would put private donor. I would put private donor. That's what I've seen on past applications. I would definitely put private donor, because I understand some people want to remain anonymous, and you can keep them anonymous, but I would put private donor. Let me see here. I think we got some more questions in here. Hold on. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm starting from the top here. 1 second. Okay, hold on. Are we able to access the recording of this session? Join the meeting late? Yep. You just go to our website. You click filmmaking grants at the top, and we're going to have the recording. Actually, after this today, I'm gonna go ahead and edit it up and get it uploaded. So we should have this to you. We should have it up on our website, hopefully by the end of the day. If not the end of today, definitely by tomorrow morning. So we want to get this up as soon as possible, because we know folks, are working. You got stuff to do, and we want you to go back and check this out. And also, if you can't do all that, we will have another session on August 13th. So if any other questions come up, you can always email me, or you can definitely hop on the next session, August 13th. But I'm gonna put my email in here as well real quick before I answer some more questions. So if you got any questions from now up until August 13th, feel free to reach out. Let me see here. Cool, so I put my email in there. Let me get to the next questions. Let's see here. Okay, hold up. Should we include crowdfunding strategies in our funding strategy? Our film is community-based and we have major buy-in from them. Oh yeah, definitely put in your crowdfunding strategy as well. I think I was saying that earlier. I'm a huge advocate of Seed and Spark. But you know, some people like GoFundMe, some people like Indiegogo, some people like Kickstarter. It's really what you're good with and what you want to do. But I think definitely you should definitely put a crowdfunding strategy. I think everyone should do at least one crowdfunding campaign for the film. Not only, you know, is it a way to raise money, but it's helped me over the years to build audience engagement. Because when people kind of put money into your project, they feel like they're a part of it. I have people, I think my first crowdfunding campaign was years ago, it was 2012 with Wilmington on Fire. And we still have some of the same people that donated then still support what we're doing. So you're kind of building a community. Not only you're raising money, which is always good, but you're building community as well. And you'd be surprised the people that are in that community that can lead to other things. Like I know one person, that's how I met the guy that does my key art now. He saw my campaign, he donated, and he was like, man, you know, I can only donate, you know, 25 bucks, but, you know, I do like a lot of big Hollywood key art campaigns, and I would love to offer my service for free to do the official key art for Wilmington on Fire too. You know what I'm saying? So you'd be surprised what crowdfunding can do, not only raise money for you, but also build community around your project and other type of resources as well that can come out of that. So I always urge everyone to at least give it a shot. It is tough, but you can do it. Let me see, could the funds be used to expand media storage capabilities like getting RAID in order to keep filming? Because the file, yeah, definitely, it can definitely use that because you are needing that for production. I would definitely list that. So that's a part of that grant impact statement that I was saying. So definitely be descriptive of that. See, would reimbursing crew for any shoots be okay? Yes. So if you had, you know, film shoots, any upcoming shoots that you have to pay your crew, you know, whether it's, you know, director, producer, you know, all that good stuff. Yes. Let's see. In the current sample rough cut field, what do we type in about the sample? Is it just a verbal description? Yeah. So what you want to do is kind of give a verbal description of what the reviewer is about to see. Like, so for example, how I do it, I always state in there, you know, there's no coloring, there's no sound mix, you know, because even though we should know that it's not going to be in there, you always want to remind people like, hey, there's no color, there's no sound mix, there's some temp music to it. And then kind of say, hey, this first 10 minutes, we have a scene with Grandmaster Moore working out, you know, working with one of his students, getting him prepared for his big championship tournament in Florida. So you kind of want to give the reviewer a light description of the sample that they're about to see. You know, kind of like a little log line, little small synopsis of what they're about to see. And also what to look for as well. You know what I'm saying? If you want us to really hone in on the main subject throughout the sample, say that. How many applications do you typically get? Whoa, we get a couple of hundred. We get a little over 200. So it ranges from like 200 to 300 every year. You see here. Cool, cool. Well, I think we might have time for maybe a couple more questions. I know it's getting late. Okay, cool. We'll take this last question here. Oh, they already answered this about when listing funding sources, can anonymous funding sources remain anonymous? Yeah, keep it. You can, I would list as private donor. I think we already answered that. Cool, cool. Well, thank you guys again. Let me share some links with you real quick. Again, like I said, August 15th is the deadline. Get those applications in. I hope, what I had to say today. Help with you. See here, can you apply for development grant and production? Well, we don't have a development grant, but you can apply to one. I think Catapult has one. I don't know if it's open at the moment, but if you type in Catapult Film Fund, they typically have a couple of grants. Development is one of them, but we do not offer a development grant. Let me put website in here. We should have this recording up, like I said, hopefully by the end of the day, no later than tomorrow morning. Here is the website to apply for the grant. Like I said, there's plenty of resources on here. Reach out to me if you have any other questions. Also, check out some of our events coming up. This link right here will also have the sign up for info session number 2. Also, a couple of our virtual screenings, a couple of resource webinars, mentorship webinars. Definitely check that out. Also, our mentorship webinars, before we head off today, we will start charging for those starting in September. That's why you should definitely check out our membership program. If you're currently fiscally sponsored by us, you're already in membership, but these are for folks who aren't a member. So I'm going to send a link in the chat to check out our membership program. So if you like what we're doing and still want to stay connected and involved in some of these things, definitely check out our membership program. It's an excellent program. But yeah, again, you guys have my email. Thank you guys so much for your patience. I know it's a long process, but I want to see everyone's application in. I'm looking forward to checking out what you have. And like I said, I get it. I'm in the same boat with you guys. So I'm with you. I'm with you. Take your time. Definitely review your application. And like I said, make sure you have those links working. And like I said, I've seen so many applications over the years. They have a great proposal and then the links don't work. So make sure that you have your links working and make sure that you have all the information that you need to have, and be very descriptive. Be very descriptive. All right, guys, good luck. And I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. So go ahead and get those applications in. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You guys have a nice day.